In 1911, two miners digging for bat guano in a Nevada cave hit something buried in the dark. It was not rock. It was a mummy, 6.5 feet tall, with bright red hair. And according to the men who pulled it from the ground, it was not the biggest one. The local Paiute tribe already knew this cave. They had a name for the things buried inside it. For generations, their elders told of a race of red-haired giants, cannibals, who terrorized their people until every tribe in the region united to destroy them. The legend says the last of the giants died right here, trapped inside this cave, burned alive. For over a century, people have argued about what was really found at Lovelock. Bones vanished. Museums were accused of hiding evidence. And in a small-town museum in Nevada, there are remains from this cave that visitors describe as impossibly large, remains you can still see today. By the end of this video, I will show you what happened when scientists finally measured those bones. And I promise you this, the truth is stranger than the legend. Stay with me until the end. This is the story of Lovelock Cave. Long before any miner set foot in Nevada, the northern Paiute people told a story. They passed it from generation to generation, around fires, for hundreds of years. The story of the Si-Te-Cah. The name means tool eaters. After the water reeds, they wove into rafts. But that is not what made them feared. The Si-Te-Cah, the elders said, were not like other people. They were tall, far taller than any Paiute. Their hair was red, like rust, and they were cannibals. The stories say they raided villages in the night. They took the dead from burial grounds. And worse, they took the living. Children disappeared. Hunting parties never came home. For years, the tribes tried to make peace with them. Every attempt failed. So the tribes did something they had never done before. Peoples who had fought each other for generations put down their old grudges and united against a common enemy. The war, the legend says, lasted years. Slowly, the tribes drove the Si-Te-Cah back, across the marshes of the ancient lake, until the last of them fled into a cave in the side of a limestone ridge. The warriors demanded they come out and face judgment. From the darkness, only silence. So they filled the entrance with dry sagebrush and set it on fire. Anyone who ran out was cut down by arrows. Everyone who stayed inside suffocated in the smoke. When the fire died, the tribes sealed the entrance and never went back. Now, here is the part that matters. This story was not invented by some modern conspiracy channel. It was written down in 1882 by Sarah Winnemucca, the daughter of a Paiute chief, in one of the first books ever published by a Native American woman. She wrote that her people had fought a small tribe of barbarians who ate their enemies, and that her family still owned a dress trimmed with their red hair. 29 years later, someone finally went inside that cave. In the spring of 1911, two miners named James Hart and David Pugh were not looking for treasure. They were looking for bat guano, which at the time was valuable for making gunpowder. And Lovelock Cave, sealed and undisturbed, held a layer of it 6 feet deep. They started digging. 250 tons of guano were stripped out and shipped away. And as the layers came off, things started to appear. Woven baskets, weapons, sandals, and then the bodies. Dozens of them, naturally mummified by the bone-dried desert air, some wrapped in funeral shrouds, and on some of the skulls, unmistakably, tufts of red hair. The miners were not archaeologists. They shoveled priceless artifacts into piles. They tossed bones aside. Some remains were reportedly burned as fuel. Whatever was in the top layers of that cave, much of it was destroyed before a single scientist ever saw it. When archaeologist Llewellyn Loud finally arrived in 1912, he still recovered around 10,000 artifacts. A later dig in 1924 found even more, including something astonishing: duck decoys, woven from tule reeds, so well preserved they looked freshly made. They were over 2,000 years old, the oldest ever found on Earth. Radiocarbon dating would eventually show that humans used this cave for more than 3,000 years. A real, ancient, vanished people had lived and died in the marshes of Lovelock, exactly where the legend said the Si-Te-Cah had been. But it was the newspapers that turned Lovelock into a legend. Because according to reports from the excavation era, 2 of the mummies were not normal. One was a woman, 6.5 feet tall. The other was a man, over 8 feet tall. And the bones were only the beginning. Before we go deeper, if stories like this one keep you up at night, do me a quick favor. Hit like and subscribe, because the next discovery is the reason this video exists. Now, back to the cave. In 1931, the Lovelock Review Miner reported that 2 more skeletons had been unearthed in the dried lake bed nearby. One was said to measure 8.5 feet, the other nearly 10. A local doctor examined remains from the area and reportedly described a jawbone so large that it fit over the jaw of a grown man, the way an adult's fits over a child's. Then there were the sandals, woven from tule fibers, pulled from the cave itself. One pair measured over 15 inches long, 15 inches. A basketball player with size 22 shoes wears about that. And these sandals showed where someone had walked in them. Today, some of the Lovelock artifacts sit in the Humboldt Museum in Winnemucca, Nevada. And in glass cases, you can see unusually large remains that draw visitors from around the world. For decades, people have stood in front of that display and asked the same question. If the giants were just a myth, what am I looking at? And Lovelock was not alone. Through the 1800s, American newspapers published hundreds of reports of giant skeletons pulled from burial mounds across the country. 7 feet, 8 feet, 9 feet, from New York to Ohio to West Virginia. Many of the reports said the bones were shipped east to the Smithsonian Institution. And then, according to the story, they vanished. No giant skeletons in any display, no bones in any catalogue, nothing. This gave birth to one of America's most stubborn conspiracy theories, that the Smithsonian systematically destroyed the evidence, dumping thousands of giant bones into the Atlantic Ocean to protect the official story of human history. In 2014, an article even claimed the Supreme Court had forced the Smithsonian to admit it. So what is true? What was actually in that cave? Here is where I keep my promise, because the truth really is stranger than you think. First, that Supreme Court story, it was fake. It came from a satire website that invents its stories, and it spread because millions of people wanted it to be true. There was no ruling, no admission, no confession. Second, the red hair. This one surprised me. Scientists who studied the Lovelock mummies found that the red color was real. You can see it. But it may not be what it seems. The dark pigment in human hair is not stable after death. Over centuries, in the right soil and temperature, melanin breaks down, and jet-black hair slowly turns rusty red. Many of the red-haired mummies of the world may have been black-haired in life. Third, the giants themselves. When researchers at the University of Nevada finally studied the remains connected to Lovelock, the tallest individuals measured around 6 feet, not 8, not 10. The measurements in those old newspapers were never verified, and out of the hundreds of giant skeletons reported across America in the 1800s, the number that survived scientific examination is 0. Every single case traced back to a hoax, a scam, an exaggeration, or the bones of extinct animals. A mammoth thigh bone looks shockingly like a giant human femur, if you have never seen either one, so the case is closed, right? Except, here is the part no one can explain away. Everything else in the legend was true. The Paiutes said an ancient people lived in the marshes and used the cave. Archaeology confirmed it. 3,000 years of it. The legend described a war ending in fire at the cave. Sarah Winnemucca recorded arrowheads and burned material there, decades before excavation. The legend described red hair. The mummies have red hair. And the tallest men of the Lovelock culture stood around 6 feet, at a time when the average man was barely 5'6". To the warriors who fought them face to face in the reeds, they were giants. Think about what that means. A story passed by firelight, with no writing, no records, nothing but memory, preserved the truth about a real, vanished people for perhaps 1,000 years or more. Almost every detail checked out. The storytellers just measured their enemies. In fear, the giants of Lovelock Cave were real. They just were not monsters. They were a people who lost a war and were nearly erased from history. And the strangest part is that we only know they existed because the people who defeated them could not stop telling their story. But not every legend dies this cleanly. There is a discovery in a desert on the other side of the world, where the bones did not measure 6 feet. That story is on your screen right now. I will see you there.